In 1999, there was a mysterious disappearance in the state of Arizona that still haunts people today. An 11-year-old girl was left alone for just 90 seconds and literally vaporized. And years later, police found a note written in the girl's name saying, "I am alive." In this video, we have gathered all the available information about what happened to Mikelle Biggs. On 2nd January 1999, two sisters, 11-year-old Mikelle and 9-year-old Kimber, were walking near their home in the town of Mesa, Arizona. It was a cool evening. It was just starting to get dark outside. Even though it was the middle of winter, Mikelle brought her bike and rode alongside her sister. At one point, the girls thought they heard the sound of an ice cream van approaching. Mikelle rushed home to ask her mum for change to buy some ice cream. She then went back outside, but the van was nowhere to be found and the girls waited. At one point, Kimber was cold and told her sister that she was going to run into the house to get her jacket and come back. But when she returned, Mikelle was gone, her bike lying in the street with the wheel still spinning. Next to it were the 2 coins the girl had prepared to buy ice cream. Kimber returned home and told her mother that Mikelle was missing. Neither she nor her mother had considered the possibility that something might have happened to the girl. The mother thought Mikelle had gone to a neighbor's house with whom the family had a friendly relationship, but the girl was not there, and the mother realized that something terrible might have happened to her daughter. She immediately contacted the police. It is worth noting that the police response was very quick, with a helicopter in the air within 30 minutes. The police stopped all suspicious vehicles and went round the surrounding houses. That day, volunteers from the girls' school handed out and posted flyers with her picture, which later appeared in shop windows and on billboards along Arizona roads. Police searched garbage cans and hundreds of homes, but found no trace of the girl. The case was assigned to detectives Butch Gates and Jerry Gessel, and the police interviewed every ice cream vendor in the state, unable to establish that any of them were in the area at the time of the girl's disappearance. Detectives reconstructed the chronology of events and came to an eerie conclusion: the girl had disappeared in just 90 seconds. That's how long Kimber had been missing. The spinning wheel on the bike confirmed that the abduction had been extremely fast. The search dogs used in the investigation failed to pick up the girl's trail, and when they did, they only took a few steps towards the road. The fact is that a dog only picks up a person's scent if they have left on their own feet. This only reinforced the police's main theory that the girl had been put into a car and taken away, all in a matter of seconds. To make matters worse, there were no witnesses. Although the girls were playing in a street full of houses, none of the neighbors saw them that evening. With evidence becoming scarce, the police began to work on standard theories. When a child goes missing, parents and other relatives are checked out. Since Mikelle's mother was at home at the time of the abduction, investigators turned to the girl's father, Mikelle Biggs. From the start, no one really believed he was involved. Why would a father kidnap his own daughter, especially in this way, in the middle of the street, within a short period of time, while his other daughter was running home? However, it soon became clear that the man had lied about his alibi. When first questioned, he said he had been at work at the time of Mikelle's abduction, which turned out to be untrue. In fact, he'd been spending time with his mistress, but it is from here that things get even more interesting. The man failed a polygraph test. His wife later admitted that she knew about the affair and that Darian had told her a month earlier. And despite the false alibi, the police eventually gave up on the father as a suspect. After all, even in the event of a divorce, his wife had no intention of preventing him from seeing the children. He simply had no motive. In addition, the detectives admitted that the results of the polygraph test could have been influenced by the emotional state of the father, whose daughter had just been kidnapped. And he may even have blamed himself, thinking that if he had been home with his family, the tragedy could have been avoided. Detectives also tracked Darian's movements that evening and found that he simply would not have had time to hide the body. The man was at home very quickly after receiving a phone call from his wife informing him of his daughter's disappearance. Detective Gessel later explained that Mikelle most likely did not know her abductor. If it was the father, she would not have thrown her bike and change on the floor. The girl tried to run away from the stranger, but didn't have time. During the investigation, the police regularly had leads that went nowhere. An anonymous man called detectives and told them that Mikelle's body was in an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. Police combed the area but found nothing. They later received an email from an anonymous man claiming to be the one who had kidnapped the girl. The FBI quickly traced the sender's IP address and sent a SWAT team to his home in the city of Phoenix. It turned out that the poisoner was a 12-year-old boy who had just decided to make a joke. Meanwhile, the police have reached a dead end and are beginning to work through even the most incomprehensible of theories. They combed through 35 abandoned gold mines in the area and even interviewed nearly 500 psychics who could have helped the investigation. Nothing came of it, of course. There was one witness who saw a copper-colored Jeep just before Mikelle was taken. The driver was quickly found, but turned out to be innocent. After that, the police were desperate to find the girl as they had literally run out of leads. This continued until 27th September 1999, when another shocking event rocked the quiet neighborhood. A woman who lived near Biggs returned home and went into the kitchen where she saw a middle-aged man with his trousers unbuttoned. Not saying a word, he attacked the woman and began to strangle and abuse her. He then set fire to the house and left. Apparently, the attacker thought his victim was dead, but the woman survived. Her neck was broken, but she was able to reach the phone and call an ambulance. On the way to the hospital, she whispered to the doctors, "Mikelle Biggs is the girl who's missing. He's taken her. You have to save her." The whole town was on its feet. Events moved quickly. The police swung into action and arrested the attacker. He turned out to be D. Bullock, a local alcoholic known in the neighborhood. He lived with his wife and 3 children, repairing wrecked cars and occasionally disturbing the peace. His house was just 2 blocks from the Biggses. He was one of the first to volunteer to help in the search for Mikelle and willingly let the police into his house to search it, but not the trailer in his backyard, which required a search warrant. You must agree that this behavior is extremely strange. A man with a bad reputation volunteers to help find a missing girl without asking any questions, gives the police a tour of his house, and suddenly forbids them to look in his caravan. Bullock has become the prime suspect, even though his wife has given him an alibi for the time of Mikelle's abduction. No one believed her story, and she was probably just scared of her husband. Detectives began digging into Bullock's past and discovered that he had 3 previous convictions for violence and harassment, as well as kidnapping a minor. He had only been released from prison in 1995, and at the time, none of the neighbors had any idea what kind of monster had taken up residence next door. Mikelle took private piano lessons several times a week from a neighbor who lived opposite Bullock's house. This suggested that the man may have known the girl long before her disappearance. After Bullock was arrested for assaulting the woman, the police returned to his house for a search and planned to examine the caravan he had previously prevented them from entering. To their disappointment, the trailer disappeared without a trace. Mikelle's parents were devastated. They were sure their daughter was there, alive or not. But it had disappeared, and the police were unable to trace its whereabouts. Bullock was sentenced to 15.5 years in prison on 27 September 1999 for assaulting the woman. He vehemently denied any involvement in Mikelle's disappearance. Not surprisingly, for attacking his neighbor and the atrocities he inflicted on her. 15 years in prison can be described as a lenient sentence. Confessing to kidnapping an 11-year-old girl, on the other hand, could have sent him straight to the electric chair. Her parents couldn't accept that their only hope of finding out the truth was gone. The mother and father wrote a letter to Bullock directly to the prison, asking the most important question: did he have anything to do with Mikelle's disappearance? No one had hoped for a confession. But the criminal's answer surprised the parents. He wrote that the conversation was too personal and suggested that his parents visit him in prison. At that moment, the parents' hearts were filled with hope that Bullock would confess, but they were to be sorely disappointed. Sitting opposite the criminal, the father asked if he had anything to do with his daughter's disappearance. Bullock simply replied that he did not. The conversation continued like this for a few minutes. Then the perpetrator simply picked up and left, accompanied by security. It looked like he was taunting the parents, giving them false hope, and then destroying it by looking them in the eye. For a sadist like Bullock, the suffering of others can bring incomparable pleasure. This is apparently the reason for his meeting with the grieving parents. Afterwards, Mikelle's father admitted that he was convinced that Bullock was involved. "I was sitting a few meters away from the man who killed my daughter, and there was nothing I could do about it." At this point, hope of solving the case had left even the most hardened of hearts. Absolutely everyone believed there would never be any new leads. Years later, they would realize they were wrong, but more on that later. On the 5th anniversary of Mikelle's disappearance, her parents buried an empty coffin, finally saying goodbye to their daughter. By then, their marriage had broken up. They had moved and were reluctant to speak to journalists. On 14th of March 2018, a dollar bill accidentally fell into the police station in Neenah, Wisconsin. It read, in crooked handwriting, "My name is Mikelle Biggs, kidnapped from Mesa, Arizona, im alive." The note was discovered by a local man who was collecting dollar bills in a jar. He was the one who came across the dollar and reported the find to the police. Mikelle's mother traveled nearly 2,000 miles to look at the handwriting to see if it was indeed her daughter's. Other relatives also came to the station, but they were all disappointed. The handwriting was nothing like Mikelle's and the name was misspelled, and the mother suggested that it might have been an unfortunate prank. The police tried to trace the note, but unfortunately, paper money changes hands so often that it was almost impossible to find the author of the inscription. Experts who examined the note suggested that it was written by an adult man trying to imitate a child's handwriting. Nevertheless, the message on the paper note seems highly suspicious. Could it have been a prank? The chances of the police or relatives finding out about the note are extremely slim. It could have been passed around for years, or even left in a bank vault, and no one would have noticed. The fact that it fell into the hands of a concerned person who reported it to the police is more miraculous than inevitable. As for the handwriting, we can't rule out the most obvious version. Mikelle could have written in a hurry for fear of being caught, and she disappeared 9 years before the note appeared. Assuming someone was holding her, did they give her a chance to write anything during that time? 9 years without practice can change handwriting beyond recognition. There is another question that no one knows the answer to. How long ago was this inscription made? It could have been in circulation for years, or it could have appeared just before the discovery. It's worth thinking about Bullock, who was due to be released from prison in 2017. Perhaps this evil hoax is his handiwork. It is enough to remember how he tormented hapless parents by giving them false hope. Perhaps we will never know the answer to all these questions, or will this case once again rock the world with unexpected details? Kimber, who last saw her older sister before the visitation, still can't forget that eerie January evening. For a long time she blamed herself for going home to get her jacket, but now she realizes that she would have been helpless against an adult kidnapper. Kimber is raising a young son who she tells all the time about his Aunt Mikelle. She calls her an angel who looks after him. The girl, like the rest of her family, is sure Mikelle kidnapped Bullock, but without evidence it will never be proven unless the perpetrator himself decides to confess in order to deal another blow to the missing girl's family. Do you think there is any hope that the inscription on the note is Mikelle's and that she is still alive?